Hey guys, welcome to my channel Miss Recap. After Luca was born, his mother Mata was captured by Bishop Ladja, who plans to use the woman's magic to open the portal that will plunge the whole world into darkness. Years later, the young man and his father set off on a journey to rescue her. On the way, they meet a tiger cub who decides to accompany them on their adventure, and they call him Percy. During the long trek to Mount Azimuth, Pancraz teaches his son to fight so that he can become a strong warrior in the future. One day, at the king's request, the trio pays a visit to Coburg Castle, and Luca witnesses the moment when Prince Harry is captured by a dragon. Immediately, the young man goes after his father to tell him what has happened, and Pancraz travels to the temple of Ladja to rescue the prince. Seeing two of his guards defeated, the villain captures the young men and uses Luca as a prisoner to prevent Pancraz from reacting. At this point, Khan and Slan attack the warrior again, and, after being defeated, Pancraz is burned alive in front of his son. Before he perish, he says that Mata is still alive and asks Luca to continue the journey to rescue her. Then, instead of eliminating the young men, Ladja decides to imprison them, and, 10 years later, both are still held prisoner in the temple. Upon discovering how the prisoners' bodies are disposed of there, Luca and Harry decide to play lifeless in order to be thrown into the water. The pair then hide inside a barrel and, as expected, end up being dumped in the river. However, after surviving the fall from the waterfall, they are caught by Ladja's guards and have to flee once again. Luckily, the pair lands on a hay wagon and manages to lose the creatures. That night, Dr. Agon helps the young people hide in his bar and informs them that he has gone to Mount Azimuth to keep an eye on Ladja. According to him, the villain is planning to open the gates of Nadiria to bring back Master Nimzo, a guy capable of causing the whole world to be swallowed up by eternal darkness. The old man says that many years ago, several zenithians lost their lives to imprison him, and now Agon is looking for the celestial hero so that he can stop Ladja. After collecting some information from the young men, the doctor sends them to Littlehaven and they return to Castle Coburg. However, instead of living in the palace alongside Harry, Luca decides to return to Wheelbrook, the town where he lived with his father when he was a child. After braving a heavy snowstorm, Luca arrives at his old house and soon finds a secret passage where Pancraz kept his most precious documents. There, the young man finds a diary and discovers that Ladja needs zenithian magic to open the gates of Nadiria, which is why Mata has been taken away. As such, there's a good chance that the woman is still alive. Furthermore, the warrior believed that Luca would be the celestial hero destined to wield the magic sword, and, on discovering this, the young man went into shock. When he returns to the surface, he meets Sancho again and is greeted by him with great joy. Over dinner, the man advises Luca to go after the zenithian sword, because only then will he be able to seal the gates of Nadiria and save his mother. To find out where the heavenly hero's sword is hidden, Luca will have to go after Briscoletti, because only he has this information. The problem is that this king lives in the kingdom of Mostroferrato, so the young man will have to face a path full of monsters to get there. Hoping to help him on his journey, Sancho gives Luca his father's old sword. So the next morning, after a long night's rest, the young man sets off on his journey and has to defeat dozens of enemies who come his way. As the days go by, he becomes more and more skilled at wielding a sword and begins to be followed by a blue jelly, which tries to get close to him. When Luca realizes he's got a pet monster, he decides to name it Gertrude. A few days later, they are both surrounded by a giant saber-toothed tiger and have to run to avoid being devoured. However, during the escape, the young man recognizes his old friend and is extremely happy to meet Percy again. The trio then continue their trek through the forest until they reach Mostroferrato, and Luca is surprised to discover that a large part of the town has been destroyed. Walking down the street, the young man spots a poster of Briscoletti, in which the man promises that whoever defeats Bjorn will be his heir. This monster is the one who destroyed the city, and King Briscoletti has decided to offer a reward to anyone who can eliminate it. A resident reveals that several brave young men have gone after Bjorn in recent weeks, but none of them have returned. The young man then walks to the castle and, when he gets there, meets Nira, his childhood friend. The girl is extremely happy to see him and relieved to know that Luca is alive. Talking to the king, the young man learns that if he defeats Bjorn, he can marry Nira and become heir to the throne. To defeat him, Luca will need the help of the zenithian sword, which was kept in Briscoletti's safe. However, when he goes to give it to the young man, the king discovers that the sword has been stolen, so Luca has to pay a visit to Bjorn's lair to get it back. When he gets there, the young man is attacked by the monster and suffers severe burns to his body, as do Percy and Gertrude. Together, they drag themselves to the nearest bar to ask for help, and, after ingesting a medicinal plant, Luca recognizes Bianca, his other childhood friend. The girl decides to accompany the young man to the lair so that she can help him defeat Bjorn, and they both end up being caught by the creature. Knowing that he will never be able to defeat that monster without the help of the zenithian sword, Luca asks Bianca to go and look for it while he distracts Bjorn. With the weapon in hand, Luca tries to wield it, but can't get the sword out of its sheath. He then discovers that he is not the heavenly hero everyone is looking for, and the whole group has to flee to avoid being barbecued. During the escape, Bianca uses her hellfire magic to protect her friends from the beast's attacks while Luca thinks of a plan to defeat it. While battling the monster, the young man realizes that Bjorn's third eye is his weak point, so he enlists the help of his friends to trick him. However, when he is about to be eliminated, the monster swears his eternal loyalty to the young man, and Luca is welcomed as a hero by all the villagers. He then goes to collect his reward and prepares to ask for Nira's hand in marriage. Encouraged by Bianca, he goes to talk to the princess and she accepts his proposal. However, the truth is that the young sorceress has always been in love with her friend and was very sad to learn that he was going to marry someone else. That night, Luca goes for a walk around town and meets an old witch who asks him if he's insecure about his marriage. The young man then says that he's going to marry the most sought-after woman in the whole kingdom and he couldn't be happier. Upon hearing this, the sorceress tells him that he is afraid to admit his true feelings and gives him a potion that will allow him to see the truth in his heart. If he decides to drink it, Luca will understand his deepest emotions, but the young man refuses and throws the witch out of his room. But that night, he gets curious and can't sleep, so he decides to drink the potion. He falls into a deep sleep and discovers that Bianca is his true love. Terrified, Luca wakes up and, when he sees the young magician asleep leaning over a table, he knows for sure that he loves her. The next morning, the young man goes to see Briscoletti and informs him that he wants to cancel the wedding. Furious, the king expels him from the city and Luca decides to return the zenithian sword to him, since he has discovered that he is not the celestial hero. However, Briscoletti advises the young man to take it on his journey, as he believes he will find the warrior capable of wielding it along the way. Before leaving, Luca goes to the bar where Bianca works and reveals that he has called off his wedding. At this point, the young woman tells him that he's the dumbest guy she's ever met. After receiving a scolding, the young warrior decides to reveal why he won't marry Nira and says that he is in love with his adventurous companion. Finally, he reveals that he wants to spend his whole life by her side. Immediately, Bianca accepts the marriage proposal and Luca goes after the witch to thank her for the potion. After saying goodbye to the young man, the sorceress leaves and assumes her true form. The truth is that Nira realized that her friend loved another woman and, despite being in love with him, decided to give him the potion so that she could help him make the right decision. Meanwhile, in the ruins of Mount Azimuth, Ladja keeps trying to break through the barrier created around Mata so that he can use her magic, but he still doesn't have enough strength to do so. Upon returning home, Luca introduces his wife to Sancho and, a few months later, a new member of the family is on the way. The couple then decided to name him Iluz and, since the baby was born, the power of the zenithian sword seems to be getting stronger and stronger. One day, the cottage where the couple live is raided and the family has to flee. Seeing her husband being attacked, Bianca asks Sancho to take her son to safety and goes to help Luca. However, she and Percy are taken by surprise by a sleep spell and end up being immobilized. Meanwhile, one of Ladja's minions attacks the young man and accidentally opens a crater in the ground. At that moment, Luca falls in and, when he manages to return to the surface, he discovers that the bishop has just captured his wife. Ladja plans to use it to open the gates of Nadiria and Luca says that only zenithians can do this. Then the young man discovers that Bianca is also zenithian and, soon afterwards, his entire body is turned to stone. When she arrives at the ruins of Mount Azimuth, Bianca says that she is not zenithian. The proof of this is that all people of this lineage have brown eyes and hers are blue. However, Ladja reveals that the girl's parents cast a spell to change the color of her eyes in an attempt to protect her. After revealing the truth, the bishop takes Bianca to the place where his mother-in-law is being held and tells her that he has not succeeded in breaking down the barrier she has created. The good news is that zenithians are able to communicate by telepathy, so Mata can teach her daughter-in-law how to do the spell that opens the gates of Nadiria. If she does, Ladja promises that he will return her freedom and reverse the spell that turned Luca into stone. Immediately, the young woman tries to communicate with Mata and the woman advises her not to believe a word the bishop says. Just then, Bianca attacks Ladja with her hellfire, but he uses a shield to defend himself and also turns her into stone. As the years go by, the villain's power only increases and no warrior is able to defeat him. As Alice's parents were not present, Sancho had to raise the young man and helped him to obtain the magical artifact capable of nullifying the petrification spell cast by Ladja. Seeing his son for the first time in 8 years, Luca hardly recognizes him and is amazed to witness the young man's incredible ability to handle a sword. Then, when a giant monster appears and attacks Aluz, Luca accidentally throws the zenithian sword so that the young man can defend himself and is impressed when he discovers that he can wield it. With a single blow, the young man manages to defeat the monsters trying to attack him, and Luca is thrilled to discover that his son is the heavenly hero. Then Sancho appears and celebrates the fact that Luca is back. When he finds out that Bianca has been taken by Ladja, the warrior doesn't think twice about going after her, and Aluz can't wait to finally meet his mother and grandmother. Before climbing Mount Azimuth, they need to find the Zenith Dragon, and Luca decides to pay a visit to Dr. Agon's bar to ask for help. The young warrior remembers that King Briscoletti said that the Zenith Dragon is living in that city disguised as a human and asks for the old man's help to find him. At this point, Luca discovers that he is the dragon, but Agon reveals that he has lost his crystal orb and, without the object, he is unable to return to his original form. The only way to find the orb is to make a request to the fairies, but finding them is not an easy task as they are protected by robots. What's more, the fairies only grant the wishes of those who are able to pass their tests, so Luca will have to be very brave if he wants to recover the dragon's orb. On the way to the fairies' hideout, the warrior discovers that he has been followed by Gertrude, and the blue jelly helps him defeat the robot guards. When one of them launches an arrow in his direction, Gertrude catches it in midair and helps Luca into the cave. At that moment, they both fall into an underground world where they finally find the fairies' hiding place. When they get there, they are greeted by the Fairy Queen, and she tells them that she will make their wish come true. Immediately, Luca asks her to close the gates of Nadiria forever and save his wife and mother. However, the Queen reveals that she can help him carry out this task, but is unable to interfere directly. So Luca reveals that he needs the dragon orb, and, after handing him a fake orb, the fairy sends him back to the past, to the moment when his child self found the magical artifact. After convincing him to show him the orb, Luca manages to get the stone and, in return, hands over the fake orb so that the young man doesn't realize he's been robbed. After taking the orb, the warrior returns to the city and helps Zenith transform. The dragon then flies with his friends to the temple and scares away all the other monsters with his mighty roar. At the sight of Bianca, Aluz manages to save her, and Luca is relieved to know that his wife is okay. When she meets Aluz again, the woman apologizes for not having been by his side in recent years and promises that they will never be apart again. The family then goes to meet Mata, and Luca manages to communicate with her by telepathy. The woman then advises her son to turn around and leave, because Ladja is stronger than ever. This time, he has achieved enough power to break through the barrier created by Mata and manages to bring down the Zenith Dragon. Immediately, Luca runs towards his mother, and Mata says that her greatest wish was to see him one last time. The woman then perishes in her son's arms, and the spell to open the gates is lost forever. Ladja then sends his subordinates to eliminate the rest of the family, and Luca uses his father's sword to defeat his enemies. During the battle, Aluz discovers how to use the powers of the Zenithian sword and easily destroys the approaching giants. Meanwhile, Bianca uses her spells to destroy those monsters, but new adversaries keep appearing, and the family realizes that they are greatly outnumbered. Suddenly, a ship commanded by Harry appears, and the prince orders his army to attack Ladja's subjects. Along with them is Bjorn, who has gone there to pay off his debt to Luca. When he realizes that he risks losing the war, the bishop takes Mata's body and tries to flee, but Luca goes after him and destroys his guards. Furious, the warrior attacks his greatest enemy, but his powers aren't strong enough to hurt him. During the duel, Luca falls into a lake and is about to be eliminated in the same way as his father. However, before he is hit by the fireball, he produces a tornado to disperse the flames and manages to knock Ladja down. Luca then plunges his sword into the bishop's chest, but the truth is that he used a shield to protect himself and wasn't hit. Suddenly, Aluz appears and helps his father destroy the shield. With the power of the two swords, father and son manage to defeat Ladja, but the man still has one last card up his sleeve. After taking Mata's body, he uses a spell to absorb the woman's powers and manages to open the gates of Nadiria to free Nimzo. In doing so, his entire body is damaged, and Aluz says he has to fly up to close the portal with his sword. Immediately, Bjorn pushes the young man towards the portal, and he throws the Zenithian sword inside. At that moment, everyone is relieved, believing that the gates of Nadiria have been closed. Suddenly, however, the whole world comes to a standstill, and Nimzo appears before Luca. The creature claims that everything there is just a computer program, and the warrior sees everything he loves most disappear before his eyes. When questioned about its identity, the creature reveals that it is a virus that was hidden in the code of the character Nimzo, and reveals that Luca is living inside a game called Dragon Quest. The virus then reveals that it was created by a programmer who can't stand the people who live in that virtual world as if it were reality. So the virus helps him recover his memories, and Luca remembers the moment when he entered a virtual reality booth to have his subconscious sent to that game. The young man remembers that, ever since he was a child, he had always been passionate about those games, and his biggest dream was to be able to meet all those characters for real. However, now he is being expelled from that place, and his character would also be destroyed if it weren't for Gertrude. The blue jelly reveals that it is an antivirus program that keeps that world safe and advises Luca to keep resisting. The creature then hands the warrior a sword and asks him to destroy the virus in order to complete his adventure. After eliminating his enemy, the whole world is restored and Luca is reunited with his family. He then reveals that Nimzo and Bishop Ladja have been destroyed, and Harry is relieved to know that his kingdom is no longer in danger. The prince then returns to Coburg with Bjorn and his army, and Luca is extremely happy to discover that Dr. Agon is still alive. A few days later, he and his family return to Wheelbrook, and the warrior laments the fact that he will have to return to the real world, as his adventure has just come to an end. However, even if he has to leave, the family that Luca built within that game will always be real to him. The movie ends here. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notification so you can watch more videos like this.